Let's open a document. Let's go up under File, Open, and on your desktop you'll find a folder called Project Files, Quark to InDesign CS3. Open that, and let's go to Chapter 1. Inside of that you'll find a document I've cleverly named Chapter 1. Double-click on that. Let's talk about panes. Look over the right side of your screen and you'll see a whole bunch of them nested in the right side. The thought is to give us more real estate, more room to work. If you click on this gray bar at the top, you'll notice it expands them even more. That way you've got the full functionality. But if you close that back down and you can figure out the icons and the titles, if you click on it, you'll see that expands it, that expands it, that expands it. And we can recess it back in by clicking that. So that's the navigational part of the panes. Let's talk a little bit about the functionality. The Pages palette, which looks a lot like the document layout palette in QuarkXPress. Top half, master pages, bottom half, document pages. Pretty straightforward compared to what we're used to. One of the big differences in the panes and how they work in InDesign versus Quark is not just what you see, it's what's hidden. Let's go to the swatches pane to give you a good example of this. It's not the color palette that we're used to using in QuarkXPress. If I click on the color palette, you'll see that's just for you to choose color, and I can choose CMYK and use the sliders. The swatches is actually the substitute for the color palette. But in QuarkXPress, if you remember, if you wanted to add a color or edit a color, we had to drive our mouse all the way over to the Edit drop-down menu and choose Colors. Well, if you look, we don't have colors here. That's because the Adobe thought is, if there's a palette, like the Swatches palette, that does what we want, they're going to give us everything in these flyout menus. If I click on the flyout menu, you'll see we have more selections here. New color swatch, new gradient swatch, load swatches. Also, on the bottom of the palette, you'll notice we have icons to achieve some of the features that are available in the flyout menu. If you look, you'll see the little shortcut that tells us show color swatches, show gradient swatches, new swatch, or delete swatch. So the palettes now, or the panes as they call them, have a lot more control over what you're doing than in the past what you're used to in QuarkXPress. So the lesson here is if you can't find something, don't be afraid to look in that little flyout menu right there. There's Insert Pages, Move Pages, New Master, on down the list. In Quark, we had to go to the Pages drop-down menu to find these things. Not anymore. It's all right here in the pane. We're not going to go through all the panes in this lesson. One of the other lessons I want you to take away from this, though, is under the Window drop-down menu, you'll see every single pane available in InDesign is listed here in alphabetical order. One of the things that's going to be difficult for you as you convert to InDesign is knowing what they're called. The example I used earlier, if you look for the color palette, because that's what you're used to calling it, well, it's not there, it's the swatches palette. The color palette in InDesign does something else. If you look for the document layout palette, it's not there, it's pages. But just know that every pane is listed under the window drop-down menu or in a sub-menu. One more little tip I'll give you before we move on. Let's go under Object and Layout, and you'll see the Align palette. I'm sure you can guess what this palette does. But what I want you to note is in the flyout menu of it, you'll see it says Hide Options. Oftentimes, this is the view you'll see, and if you're new to the application, you won't know that you're missing something unless you just get in the habit of clicking Show Options. You can also see it in the Gradient palette. Oftentimes, it will come condensed, and you'll want to expand it with the Show Options. You can also do it by clicking these tiny little arrows right here to the left of the name, and that will expand and contract your palettes. So just know that the view you're looking at may not be the complete palette. I'm going to click out of this pane, and we'll move along.